The Mark V Supra might be one of the biggest reverse catfishes in history. When it was unveiled in March of 2019 as the Toyota FT1, the car community donned their pitchforks and were ready to burn it to the ground. That's not a real Supra was the sentiment you heard on every forum and Instagram post. Maybe a year or two later, this had completely changed. It seems that once everyone saw and heard the new A90 in person, they completely forgot that it's basically a Z4 under the Toyota panels. Regardless of who designed it, there's no denying it's a great looking car, but some sick wheels make it look even better. If you're here, you're probably looking for wheel ideas for your A90 to A91 Supra. Good news, you're in the right place. Before we get into the video, be sure to hit that like button, hit subscribe, turn the notification bell on, and drop a comment with what vehicle we should do a fitment guide on next. If you have an A90, A91, or any other car under the face of this, under the sun, be sure to upload it to our vehicle gallery to 1, take part in our monthly fitment battles, and 2, show off your car to the world and help others dial in their fitment. Now, let's get into the Supra fitment guide. Despite there being a few variations, manual versus DCT, 2.0 i4 and 3.0 i6, all versions share the exact same fitment front and rear. This info here is going to apply to all of the 2020 plus Toyota Supras. Basic fitment info on these things: 50112 bolt pattern, M14 lug bolts, 66.5mm center bore, and for those of you that like to torque your lugs with a torque wrench, 103 foot-pounds. But before we can talk about aftermarket wheels and tires for your Supra, this is what your Supra is going to come with from the factory. 18-inch cast wheels, 18x9 plus 32 in the front, with a 255/40/18 tire and an 1810 plus 40 in the rear with 275/48 tire, or the 19s with 19932, 255 tire and 1910/40, 275 tire. What can we say about the stock fitment? Whether you have 18s or 19s, they're gonna be a staggered setup. A square set of wheels is possible on this car, but staying staggered is preferred. Overall, the fitment is not terrible right out of the box, but we can definitely make some small improvements. As far as recommended sizing, 18, 19, and 20 are all popular for aftermarket wheels. 20-inch wheels don't come standard, but look great in certain applications. The brakes on the A90 do make 18s the smallest wheel possible in the front, and really you wouldn't want to go any smaller anyway, with the exception of rears for certain drag racing applications. Now, choosing what size wheel to put on your Supra might be as hard as choosing the brand or model, as all three options work well. The examples that I'm going to share with you later in the video are ordered by size to help make the comparison easy. Width and offset are much more aggressive than stock, however, not excessive. A popular combination involves adding half an inch to the width of the stock wheel, so 9.5 in the front, 10.5 in the rear. With this, you keep the factory stagger, but you just make it a little bit more aggressive. Offset is a similar story, just subtract 10 to 20 mils from the factory 32 and 40 offset. An example setup would look like this: 19.5 22 in the front and 1910.5 30 in the rear. Tires, the stock rears at 275 are pretty generous with the factory power figures, but a few more pounds of boost on that B58 can net you 50 plus horsepower. Only a couple years after launch, people were already making 1,000 plus at the wheels, so you're probably going to want a wider tire. But how wide can you go?
How? Hold on, bro. How?
Well, logically, if you increase your wheels half an inch in width, you could bump your tires up from 255 and 275 to 265 and 285. That's great if you want some extra breathing room, but a lot of Supra owners like to go bigger. 275 in the front and 295 in the rear is a healthy increase where you're not going to run into any issues as long as you've got the right wheel spec. There are a few Supras with 305s in the rears, and we'll look at some, but the chances of rubbing increase when going to this size. Whether 305s will fit will come down to differences in tire manufacturer, suspension setup, and tire sidewall. Aspect ratio is going to vary dependent on the diameter of wheels that you get. 18s get a larger profile tire, while 20s are going to get rubber bands. You will see 18s, 19s, and 20s and what tires to go with them when we get to the examples later on in the video. First things first, you're going to want to lower your Supra on springs or coilovers. Many of these cars are lowered in one way or another, and springs are the most popular way of achieving that for your daily driver that might see the track here and there. Unlike the old Supras that absolutely need coilovers to tame that beastly wheel gap, a set of springs work wonders on the Mark V. Swift, Eibach, and H&R are a few of the brands that make quality springs. Pick your favorite. HKS and a few others like KW now make adjustable height lowering springs that have the same ride quality as regular springs with the ability to dial in the height and not lose your adaptive dampening. Coilovers aren't a must-have for a daily driver, but track-focused cars can benefit from a set. Fortunato and BC Racing are our picks here, starting right around $1,000. If you wanted to ball out, you could run something like KW V3s with external reservoirs, but be warned, they are not cheap. Another reason to go with coilovers is if you want to be a fitment god. The coilovers go lower than springs and are stiffer to help minimize wheel defender contact on bumps. Now, we're going to talk about stud conversions. Ever heard the slogan, keep your Toyota a Toyota? Well, Japanese cars are supposed to have lug nuts, not bolts. So in this case, it's make your Toyota a Toyota with a lug stud conversion. This doesn't affect fitment in any way, shape, or form, but it makes changing your wheels oh so much easier. We had to mention it to make your life easy. Now, if you wanted to make your stock wheels flush with spacers, you could do this, and this is a great way to bring your factory wheels flush to the fenders on a budget. The preferred look is slightly larger spacers in the front, right around a 20 mil in the front, a 15 mil in a rear, and if you don't have studs, you're going to need extended bolts. One of the best things you can do is buy the spacers and bolts in a package, which for under $300 is going to make this a flush setup. Now the Supra's not a budget build, so you're not going to see a lot of entry-level rep wheels on them. If you're shopping for wheels, it might be time to save up to get something name brand for your Supra, and spacers are a great way to make your car look better in the meantime. Now if you're ready to invest in a set of wheels, we're going to start with the go-to side. 19s are going to fill out those fender arches perfectly while remaining fairly light. The only real downside compared to 18s is the bump in price for both wheels and tire. First up, we're going to be taking a look at the wheel and tire setup that all of you want to run, Volk Racing TE37 SLs in 19.5/22, 19.10.5/35 with Pilot Sport 4S, 275/35 and 305/35 at stock height. Volk TE37s are possibly the most common wheels on this chassis, and there's a great reason for that. They suit the car so well. They're so common you could even argue that they're getting played out, and if you want to be a little different, an alternative is the Graham Light 57DR. Ultimately, get whichever one you prefer and suits your budget the best. Wheels are just a certain part of the equation, and if you feel one wheel makes your car look too cookie cutter, there are plenty of other exterior mods to differentiate your Supra. Diffusers, canards, EVS front fenders, your budget is the only limit. Now this is what stock height looks like on 19-inch wheels, a little high for my liking personally, but maybe you live in a place with rough roads or have an extra steep driveway. Next up, we're taking a look at some Work in Motion ZR10 two-piece, 19.5/22, 1911/40, running that Pilot Sport 4S again, great tire by the way, 275/35 in the front, 305/30 in the rear, lowered on some springs with no rubbing at all. This is a flush setup. This 2020 shows how much of a difference a humble set of lowering springs can make on your Supra. If you're going to run that 305 in the rear, 305/30 is going to give you a bit more room as it's over an inch smaller in overall diameter to the 305/35. A lot of Mark 5s are on monoblock wheels, either flow formed or forged, and these Work in Motion 2Ps show that a wheel with a deep dish can look great too. Next up, we are taking a look at a set of Work VSXX in 19.5/29, 19.10.5/32, running some Nitto NT555 R2s, 265/35 in the front, 305/35 in the rear. This one's flush on springs, no rubbing or scrubbing at all. This 22 is also on a set of Work wheels, but on this time, 3-piece VSXX instead of 2-piece. Work Wheels is one of our favorite brands, a JDM brand with a storied history of making some of the strongest wheels on the market. If you're looking for any Work wheels, you know the place to get them, 3piece.us, baby. 305/35 is going to fit, but just barely. This is another car that makes a strong case for lowering springs. At this height, there's no rubbing or scrubbing of the fenders whatsoever. The setup is very similar to the last with the 305/35 instead of that 30. The taller sidewall gives it a bit more rake, but it looks meaty. Now we're looking at some Advan GT Premiums, 19.5/22 in the front, 10.5/32. You sensing a theme here? Falcon FK5 10s, 265/35 in the front, 285/35 in the rear, on some RSR Coilovers. This is Jane's car, which is featured in an episode of Built. This one's designed for street and track use. It's a mixed duty build. For wheels and tires, it has a pretty tame setup as the engine's mostly stock with just a tune. Unlike other cars, Jane opted for coilovers instead of springs. The ride height is more or less the same as you would get on springs, but the coilovers are going to give you that edge on track. She added some other goodies to this build like a lug stud conversion, EVS fenders, and much, much more. Check out Built episode 2 for a full breakdown on this car, which is going to be linked down below in the description. So you want to run 20s on your Supra? Well, 19s are the go-to, but it's hard to say what's in second place, 20s or 18s. Aesthetics are the main motivator to run those big old 20s. They are heavier and in more cases require an expensive 30 aspect ratio tire. If your tire is wider than a 255 on 20s, you're gonna need a 30 sidewall to fit. Lowering is a must on 20s if you don't want to turn your Mark 5 into a donk, although that might look kind of cool. South Florida boys, I'm looking at you. You're gonna need to invest in springs, coilovers, or maybe even more to make it happen. This first one's on a set of variant Kryptons, 20x10 plus 28.5, 20x11 plus 32 on 265/30s and 285/30s. This one's on air. So, first Supra on air, what do you think of this one? Well, you don't need an airbag kit to lay frame if you want to run 20s, but it looks pretty slick. This is the most extreme example of why you should run 20-inch wheels, form over function. Not to say that 20s can't be used for spirited driving, but the main reason to get them is to fill out those big arches, or in this case, to tuck those rear wheels to bed. Now switching it up, we're taking a look at 18s on the Supra, which is a more popular size for cars that get used on the track. With this size, square setups are also more common. Not saying you have to run 18s or have to run a square setup for the track, but the two seem to go together like peanut butter and jelly. There are some benefits like cheaper tires and possibly more traction with that taller sidewall. Now, fitment facts on this one, Titan 7 TS5s, 18x10.5 plus 38, and 10.5 plus 38 in the rear as well, running a 15mm spacer. Running the Potenza RE71s in a 275/35 all around. This one's on stock suspension with SPL front lower control on. This is a build where function is a priority. This shows just how wide you can go on stock suspension and deal with a little poke to achieve more grip. They do need a 15mm spacer to clear the front strut, struts, but it looks awesome. Next, we're taking a look at some Advan TC4s, one of my personal favorite wheels, 18, 10.5, 32 all around, wrapped up in those Nitto NTO5s, 275, 40, 18. These are lowered on HKS lowering springs with a stud conversion, no rubbing whatsoever. If you have Fitment OCD, this might be the setup for you. The front and rear match perfectly with the setup, no spacers at all. The rears fit almost the same as the stock base wheels, but will poke out about 8 millimeters more. The fronts are going to poke more than that, half an inch or about 12 mils over stock. Still, nothing crazy. Not surprisingly, this car has no issues with rubbing, even lowered on springs. The TC4s are more affordable than the other Advan models if you don't want to shell out for the GT Premium or GT Beyond. If you're looking for Advan wheels, check out our website linked in the bio. Summing it all up, fitment on the MK5 Supra is not too hard. Look at the factory specs for reference, add half an inch to the width, subtract a few mils from offset, and voila.
Hey, come on, baby! Come on! Yes! Come on! Yes!
Flush fitment. The big decision is choosing the diameter, 18, 19, or 20, all of which will fit fine. For tires, multiple cars on our list are running a 305 rear, which may or may not work depending on how much additional work you want to put in. That's why we recommend a 295 to ensure no hassle. In the front, 275 is well-charted territory. If you have the correct wheel fitment, a pair of 275 is a non-issue. Once you nail the fitment on your Supra, feel free to share it in our vehicle gallery to help others with their fitment while being entered to win our monthly prizes in our fitment battles. If you just want to check out the gallery, it's linked below as well. If you liked the video, be sure to drop a like, comment, subscribe, and let us know down in the comments what vehicle we should cover next. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.